Okie dokie. So we can get started. I think everyone who's going to be here is going to be here for this time around at least. Did everybody get a handout back at the door? Very cool. So basically, as we're going along, there's a spot on there for you guys to take some notes. There's some fill-in-the-blank stuff as we're going through it. I'll kind of give a heads up when it's the spot where you can think of like where we're at kind of with that, because we probably won't get to the handout necessarily until the second piece here. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Arron King. I spoke here last year for the summit. Kind of a similar topic, maybe a little bit different in the sense of that was kind of learning how to deal with life or cope with life when everything was kind of falling apart. This year is a little more, we'll say, specific in terms of life is painful, life hurts, and so that's going to be our focus for the next 45 minutes or so. I will have some time. I anticipate I'll have some time at the end, so if you have questions, you can certainly ask them. If you're like, there's no way I'm talking about any of this in front of a group of people, that's not a big deal. We obviously have time after this session before the next one starts, so don't hesitate to be like, oh, I have a question, I want to talk about something. I'm here for that. So, when life hurts, so in essence, life is filled with a lot of very powerful moments. They can go from anything from like the super awesome and great, right? And when we think about those great moments and those fun times, we want to remember them. So we're in a spot where we're like, we want to remember this. We want to talk about this forever. We laughed, we smiled, life was great. And then if we get 6 months down the line or a year down the road, we're still in the spot where we're like, that was a great memory, something I hope to hold on to forever. Kind of the exact opposite of that is, instead of being incredibly wonderful, it is incredibly painful, right? So we are in a place in those moments where we are incredibly unhappy. We are in a place where maybe we're in the spot where we hate what happened, and we're very angry about something that took place or could be taking place still in our lives. And so when we get 6 months or a year down the road from that, we say, I never want to remember that, right? So we have this huge spectrum, this huge space in between where we're like, life is great to life is absolutely horrible. So for this session, for our conversation tonight, the importance, I think, kind of falls into how do we handle or cope with or figure out when life is extremely painful, we're unhappy, and we have no idea what to do next. So how do we get there, right? That's an important initial question that people have is, well, how did we get to the spot where we're in pain, right? And maybe it's a circumstance where we are feeling lonely, we're feeling a sense of hurt, whatever that means in that moment to you. We feel angry, perhaps, a sense of I've been betrayed, or nobody wants to be around me, or they don't care about me, or they are abandoning me, they're rejecting me. And kind of encompassing that is kind of this feeling of like I'm not wanted, I'm not needed, and perhaps there's a piece of that where the feeling comes to a very real spot where we say, maybe it's not even worth living, right? Which is a very real thing that a lot of people experience, whether they want to talk about it, admit it or not. So my role within the community here and why I was asked to come here this evening is because I'm a therapist in town, right? So I'm a therapist. I work with a lot of teenagers, processing through the difficulties, the complications, the chaos of life, right? Very rarely, and I work with a lot of teens, right? So it's not like it's just a handful or a couple, but very rarely do people come in and they say, my life is great, I just want to sit and talk this evening about how great my life is, right? Like you have your friends for that, right? So largely, the people that I interact with have something going on in their life, and they're like, don't know what to do with it. So working with PJ and Mike, this was part of the conversation to say, okay, how can we talk about things that are hard to talk about? Because they are very difficult topics. So me personally, right, when I was your age, right, and actually, how many of you in this room, just a show of hands, senior high, like high school? Okay, junior high? Okay, so kind of a good mix, so that's pretty cool. So when I was in high school, let's say, I was probably around that age, I mean, very difficult circumstances were happening in my life, right? As I look back on it now, I would say I was very depressed, right? Now, I didn't maybe call it that when I was in high school. Like, I didn't know that's what it was. I just know I wasn't happy with my life. And it's slightly ironic now because I'll sit and I'll look at pictures from when I was in high school, and I can say, well, I was miserable when that picture was taken. Like, I really hated myself. Like, life was bad, right? And I couldn't necessarily pinpoint it to, like, this is what caused that, or this isn't what caused that. It was just me looking and saying, life sucked. And so, coming out of that now, I can understand how difficult it is to have those conversations, to be in a place where it is, how do I talk about my feelings, my emotions, how can I express them in a way that makes sense and is understandable to others. So this is one of the things that came out of it, and I think, I don't remember for sure, but a couple weeks ago or a month ago, they did like promo videos for all of these things, right? So we each did like 20, 30 seconds on what our topics were about, and I made a few versions of it, so I don't know if I shared this or if this one got played, but here is my favorite verse in the Bible, right? Like, the Bible's got a lot of stuff going on, but this is one of my favorite verses. It comes out of John chapter 16, right? So Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, in this world, you will have trouble. And I love that, because I think it's so incredibly authentic for what we experienced 2,000 years ago to what we're experiencing now, right? Like, we are going to have troubles. We're going to have problems. We're going to have stuff taking place that is hard, and we don't know what to do with it, right? So, from where I'm at, I think it's incredibly important to be honest about the circumstances that are taking place in each of our lives, right? Because I think if we're truly honest and if we're truly open about things, we're in a spot where we can say, maybe life is hard, or we know somebody whose life is hard. I think that's a big significant thing too, right? So even if your life seems to be going well, maybe you have a friend or a family member, or you have something going on where it is like their life is really hard, and we don't know what to do to help that, right? Or how to help them with whatever they're going through. So I have a moment of interaction, all right? Like, and I don't do this a lot, but here's my challenge for you if you wish to participate. Everyone close your eyes, right? So close your eyes, and for the next couple minutes, like, no one, I just ask that nobody opens their eyes and looks around, right? So my first question, and it's just going to be a series of questions. If it applies to you, just raise your hand, okay? No pressure. If you're like, I'm not doing this, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to, like, call you out. But if you have been abused in some way, right? Physically, emotionally, sexually abused, just raise your hand. Okay? And keep your hands up. Keep your hands up as we're going along. If you have ever hurt yourself, whether you were cutting yourself or whatever that may look like, just raise your hand as well. So if you've had your hand up, just keep your hand up as we're going along here. If you ever thought that it would be better to end your life, like it would be better off if I was dead versus alive, raise your hand. If you feel like no one loves you, and if you think that you're all alone in this world, raise your hand. Now, these might be more popular, right? So if you have been bullied at school, teased at school, either by other students or by Teachers or other adults, raise your hand. And finally, if you have been made fun of online, on social media, people have posted pictures or said things, go ahead and raise your hand for that. So if you have raised your hand for any of this, just raise your hand one more time, and I ask that you open your eyes now and kind of take a look around and see how many people in the room were impacted by one or more of those questions. Okay? Pretty much everyone here, right? Including myself. So, life hurts. Like, it can be extraordinarily painful. Now, I like to break these kind of into two categories. Sometimes life hurts, and it is completely outside of our control. Our parents are divorcing. There's a death of a family member, a loved one, a friend. There's some type of abuse that's taking place, has taken place in your home. There's bullying, there's teasing. We have no control over somebody else's actions or choices as it impacts us. We don't. We're in a spot where we are, in essence, a victim, and no one can stop it. We also have the type of pain and hurt that we do have some control over, right? So these things might be, we're in a disagreement with our friends at school, and I'm angry about it, and someone said something that hurt me, but it got kind of intense, and I said some things that probably hurt them too, right? So in that situation, we do have a little bit of control over that. I like to call it the drama triangle, right? So what this basically is, this is really high. Okay, so we have the drama triangle, which means that there is a victim of this, there's a rescuer, and there's also a perpetrator, okay? So what this can look like in some situations is somebody is making fun of me, is ripping on me. Therefore, I'm the victim, because this person is ragging on me. But then I get the help of somebody else to kind of make my life better, right? I find someone else. This happens all the time, like for your parents and such. This happens all the time in like the workplace, right? Where my boss wants me to do something that I don't really want to do, and I kind of hate it. So I'm going to pull in one of my other coworkers to complain about my boss. Okay? This happens all the time at school, right? Like, you guys are in this situation all the time where you're like, somebody is ripping on me. Maybe it's a circumstance where you're ripping on somebody else, right? So maybe you're the perpetrator, kind of targeting somebody else, and they're getting somebody to kind of tackle you, right? Like, so this type of thing happens all the time, and I bet that if you kind of sat down and started looking at, like, your life and some of those really stressful drama situations at school, you would say, oh yeah, I can see this. Like, I can see this play out. Relationships, this happens all the time, right? Our significant other says something or does something that makes us mad, and so we go to our best friend and we're like, you got to help me understand what's going on here, right? And so we always have this kind of, this thing in play, right? So this is the drama triangle. We all do it. It happens on a regular basis. It's just important to know that that creates hurt in our life, or it can, depending upon which side of the triangle you're on. So certainly something to kind of always be aware of in the sense of what's going on. Social media. This is a big one, right? Social media has done three things really. First, it connects us in a way that we've never been able to connect before, right? You guys can connect to each other 24/7, 365 days a year, right? You guys are always in contact with each other. Life is great. But what's kind of happened is there's two negatives that have come out of it that directly impact like our lives hurting, right? So the first would be is that as a whole, including myself, we would rather be liked than respected, right? We want to post something that's going to get the most likes, that's going to get the most clicks, that's going to get the more, we want people to see it, acknowledge it, and we want credit for that, right? Myself included. I post stuff sometimes that I'm like, this better get a lot of likes on Facebook, right? So we all do that. But at its core, we should really want to be respected, not necessarily just liked. The other thing that has come out of it is we have taken away the concept of truth from our lives, because truth has become relative now. And what I mean by that is this. Somebody can say something about you, or you can say something about somebody that's not even real. Like, it's just made up. And it gets passed around to everyone. Maybe it's a situation where, because let's not be naive to how things work, right? You share a picture of yourself to your significant other, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, and you're like, this is for their eyes only. And it's not for their eyes only, and they share it with all of their friends. And then their friends pass it around to their friends. And you're left in a spot where you're like, I wish I was dead. Because now everybody at school has seen this picture of me, and nobody was supposed to see it except for my boyfriend or my girlfriend. Life suddenly sucks in a quick, fast hurry, right? So these are all things that have kind of come out of how technology has evolved, how things have evolved in that arena. So we get to a place, regardless of the circumstances, whether it's something that we have created, whether it is something that is completely outside of our control. I like to think of it as that there's two different type of victims that go with that. So there's let's say a capital V victim. This would be no control. I am completely helpless. I have no control over my parents' divorce. I have no control over the abuse that's taking place in my household. Then we have the small v victim, and this would be something that we have control over. We have some control in the sense of saying, how can we change this or make this better? This is maybe a little more common, but when this is present, this hurts a lot. Like the capital V, because it is outside of our control, and life is hard. Life is awful. And so when we get to that place where there is a crazy amount of hurt, of pain, of suffering, we're left to be in that spot where we say, what do we do now? Like, what on earth do we do now about this? And so the question is then asked, whether it is amongst your friends, maybe it's just you at home, maybe it's just trying to figure everything out, is, well, what can I do about this? Right? Like, what on earth can I do to make this better or different? So, therein lies the handout, right? So, I have 6 keys, we'll call them 6 keys, of things that we can do when everything seems to be falling apart, okay? So the first one, take care of ourselves emotionally, is the fill in the blank there. So what does that mean? Like, take care of ourselves emotionally? Like, life is horrendous. What do you mean, take care of myself emotionally? Well, everybody, it's not just for one person or multiple, but it is basically first to say it's okay to cry. Like, it is okay to cry over the circumstances, whether, because it's pain and it's hurt and life is hard. We need to be in a spot where we can understand our emotional pain. So this is big for guys, okay? We get into a spot where we will say, if I cry, or if I try to understand my emotions, or try to work through my emotions, that must mean that I am weak. Or, and this is something that's come up with some of your peers here, right? Like, clients that I have that are probably here tonight has been, if I admit that I'm weak, that means that there is something wrong with me. And I would rather have pain than admit that I'm weak. Which is not okay. Like if you have that perception, please don't, right? There is nothing wrong with being able to say, I'm not okay. And it's okay to say, I'm going to cry. So we have to be able to take care of ourselves emotionally. Sometimes what happens, kind of along those same lines, is it will be, well, I will try to take care of myself, but I have my friends that are going to boost me up emotionally, which only works so well because your friends might have a lot of stuff going on in their lives too, and they can't take care of them and you and the other people with your friend groups, right? So I sometimes think of it like this. So the Coast Guard, you guys are familiar with the Coast Guard, right? So big storm comes in, a ship sinks, or somebody was out kayaking and their kayak tips over, right? The Coast Guard comes out into the ocean or the big body of water to save them, right? So guy jumps in the water, grabs the person who's drowning, that's having problems, and let's say they get up close to the rocks, right? And they are trained that if a wave is going to throw them into the rocks, that they put the injured person between them and the rocks, right? And you think, well, that's stupid. Like, the person's already hurt. Like, they're already injured. Like, why on earth are they going to put them between the rocks? Like, they're going to hit the rocks first. Like, why on earth would you do that? And the reason is why are you going to have two injured people drifting in the ocean with no one there to save them, right? When you could have one injured person. So sometimes what happens, you're in your friend groups, you're in your stuff, right? And you're like, I can talk to them about anything and everything, and life is great, but they can't help me anymore. Like, it's too hard for them to help because now they're being dragged down, and now you maybe have two injured people trying to help each other, which isn't super helpful, right? So it is crucial that we say we need to take care of ourselves emotionally. And that doesn't mean that you're all by yourself. That doesn't mean you're on your own. You can come and talk to someone like me, right? You can go and talk to someone here, right? You could go talk to PJ, you could talk to Mike, you could talk to somebody and be like, my life is really hard. I just need to figure this out. That's actually my second point, right? So the second one is share your story and event with supportive family and friends. Right? And so that can mean really anything. If it's just a matter of you saying, I am working on coming to terms with whatever's happened, I'm going to talk about it a little bit, I'm going to share it, I'm going to kind of explore what this means to me. Sometimes that's what it takes, is to have a supportive family member, have a supportive friend, a pastor, a leader, somebody, a therapist for me, right? If somebody came to me of just kind of hanging out and let's just talk about life for 45 minutes, an hour, right? I don't do anything too magical, right? Like, people think that I do. I simply listen. I just kind of say, whatever you want to talk about it. And they do, right? So having people in your life to have that relationship with is important. Now, you might be sitting there right now and you're like, I don't have anyone. I don't have anybody that I can talk to about this. Okay? That makes the pain even worse, right? Because now you feel like, I have no one to talk to, my life is falling apart, I have no idea what to do next. And I think that's when I come into play, right? Because it's easy to reach out to me and say, I'm struggling with this, I don't know what to do about it. When I was your age, honestly, I didn't have a lot of people to talk about it. I was in a place when I was growing up where I didn't think that I had anyone to talk to, or I would somehow be shunned out if I actually talked about what was going on with my life. Right? That went on until I was probably in my early 20s, where I was just kind of like, I can't talk to anyone about anything because the world will fall apart, right? And I had to. Like, I had to go talk to a counselor to say, what do I do with this? Like, my life is in shambles, and every day I'm thinking it would be better off if I was not even here anymore. I mean, I had to do that, right? But for me, I had to kind of drill through this concept of, if I talk to someone, that means I'm weak, and I should be able to figure this out on my own. All of that was just craziness, right? I wasn't weak, and I did need somebody. So having some supportive family, holy moly, okay. Having some supportive family, friends, whatever I need to do to have a place to kind of talk and process through it. Next one, looking for positive and negative situations. Now you're like, how in the heck can we find positive in a negative situation? Like, this is unheard of. Like, my life is falling apart. You're telling me to find something positive? Yes. Yes, I am. So here's some examples of what this positive thing can look like in the midst of a negative situation. It might tell you that you have great strength. You might be in a spot where you're like, I have come so far through this struggle, through this journey. Look at how far I've come. I have great resilience because of how far I've come. It's a positive and the negative. It might prepare you for a better future, right? Because you might come through all of this stuff, and life is hard, life is miserable, and you can now say, I don't want to do this anymore, and I am going in a different direction. I'm going in 180 degrees in the other direction. I want a better life for myself. I work with some adults, right? Not a lot, but I work with some adults that will say, I had such a rough time growing up. My teenage years were really awful. I am now going to do everything in my power to make sure that my kids have a better life than what I do. Maybe some of your parents or others, you've heard others say that, right? So it puts us in a spot where we're like, my life is so bad right now, but I am looking for a different direction to go in, and I'm going to change the direction of my future, whatever that means, right? And there's a lot of positives that lie kind of under the surface. It can be extraordinarily hard to find. Like, I never want to minimize that, and I never want to be like, just go figure it out, because it's not that easy by any stretch. I know that firsthand. A lot of you know that firsthand, right? Just being in a spot to be like, I'll just get over it, or I'm just going to find a positive in this. It can be really hard to do. But I think it can become kind of essential to be able to see what are some of the positive things, maybe some positive growths that have happened in my life as a result of whatever happened or is still happening. Next one. Remember that everybody hurts sometimes. We can get into a spot where we think everybody's life is better than mine. Like, my life sucks and everybody's is better than me. I have an adult client that I've worked with for a few years now, and he'll say that to me. Like, we'll talk, and he will say, of all your clients, does anyone have it worse than me? And I'll say, yes. Like, everybody has it worse, right? Like, from our perspective, it's always worse. There's nothing wrong with that, because it's important for us to know that everybody is going through something at some time, right? It's not meant to, like, lessen the pain or minimize your experience. That's always my mission when I meet with anybody, is to make you know that whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're going through, is front and center and is incredibly important and crucial. So it's not made to lessen your pain, to minimize what you're going through or what your experience has been. More than anything, it's good to know that, just so that you don't feel alone. Because it can become very isolating, right? We can become very isolated in thinking, my life is horrible, and because of how horrible it is, I'm like all alone. And it might be important to know that everybody goes through something. 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago, my dad died, right? Like, it was a crazy, he had cancer, but it was a crazy, like, 6-9 month process of going through that, right? Some of you have been through that experience, right? A death of a family member or a loved one. And it was, in that experience for me, it was kind of this belief of, we're alone in this, right? And you get through that and you're like, whoa, actually there's a lot of people that go through this. And I'm not alone. Like, we're not alone. Like, my family's not alone. Like, there's a lot of people that lose loved ones every single day. And so it's just a matter of knowing that there's a little bit of comfort to know that somebody else has gone through this experience before. Not alone. Next one, give yourself compassion, especially in your struggles. So compassion, sometimes we refer to it as like, so sometimes it would be like self-love and compassion, right? So, I mean, what does that mean, right? So basically, first, it's okay to take care of you, right? Which kind of goes to one of our earlier points, right? But it's okay to take care of you. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through. It's okay to love yourself. Sometimes we lose track of that. Like, we get so deep into whatever is going on, whatever is taking place, that we start hating ourselves, right? So we get depressed, we get anxious, our life is falling apart, and that equals then self-hate. Like, I hate myself so much because of what I'm going through. How could I ever love myself? And so that's why I would say that it's okay, and we need to give ourselves compassion. We need to give ourselves some self-love. An important component to this, it's okay to forgive ourselves. We oftentimes get into a place where we're like, this is all my fault. It's all my fault that this happened. It's all my fault that my dad did this to me, or that my mom did this to me, or that my friend did this to me. It's on me. It's all my fault. It's not your fault. Like, for so many things, you have no control over it. So it can't be your fault, right? It's somebody else's fault. So it's okay to forgive yourself for whatever is happening or happened. The last one. This is the hard one. I won't lie. Like, this is the hard one. Maybe you're like, Aaron, all of those have been hard. Like, all of these are. The last one. When someone else hurts us, we need to forgive others. It's the hard one. Because if somebody wrongs me, the last thing that I want to do is forgive them. Let's be honest. The last thing I want to do is be like, you're off the hook, right? A lot of times, if we're being honest, I want to like get revenge, I want to retaliate, I want to like stick it to them. But that doesn't help me, right? Sometimes I'll say this, like, something happens to us, and we hold that inside. Like, we hold that deep inside, and we're like, this was painful, this hurt. It goes beyond that a little bit, and then we say it's also our fault. Like, if I would have done this differently, that wouldn't have happened, right? Not true. Like, none of that's true, because it was out of our control. But it may be years later. The person that hurt me doesn't even care anymore. Like, they moved on with life. Like, they don't even know that I was hurt in that process. And so they might be in the place where we are, in essence, giving them power over our lives. Like, we are letting our lives, I have a client, she's probably in her mid-20s, like, she'd be older than all of you, but she was sexually abused when she was younger, right? And where she falls now is she's like, I she can't function, right? Like every day is like a challenge for her to function. And when we talk about it, it will be, well, this person who she hasn't talked with in 10 plus years did this to me, and if I ever see him, I'm going to lose it. It's like this person doesn't even probably even know that you're angry. Like, I mean, you've given him so much power. Like, you can't function now because of something that happened to you. Now, the forgive part is hard, right? Because we're like, we don't want to forgive. Like, forgiving means that we're like letting them get away with something. And maybe we have to, depending upon what it is. Not everything, right? Because really bad things have happened, and they shouldn't get away with it. But maybe at a certain point it becomes important to say, I need to let this go because this is hurting me more than what it's hurting them. So, and I'd just note on that, like, that's a long process. That's not like you sitting there tonight and you're just going to say, oh, I forgive him. It's done. Moving on with life. It's never that easy. Please don't think that it's that easy, because it's not. I've worked with people for years, and we're not even at that point yet, right? Like, because there's so much stuff under the surface. There's so much hurt. There's so much pain that it's just not as simple as get over it, right? So don't leave here tonight thinking, oh, Aaron said I should get over it. That's not the case. But we might have to get to a place where we offer some forgiveness to somebody else. So, last couple things. The bottom of the handout is a spot for you. You don't have to do it now, but if you get some time tonight when you get home, when you are in a place where it's just quiet, is to just jot down some positive things that have happened in your life. Or in the last year. I think that's what the sheet says, doesn't it? Like, in the last year, what are some positive things? So in the last year, what are some positive things that have happened? And you're like, why am I doing this? Like, this is dumb, right? But, and here's why. We can get so lost in all the negative. We can hate ourselves, our lives are falling apart, we feel like everything's falling apart, and we lose track of positive things that have happened in their life, in our own lives. So I find it to be super important to take a couple of minutes and jot down. You don't need to have a long list, you don't have to have anything big, but just enough to be like, oh, that was a good thing. Some of my clients that I work with, I will say, I'll have them keep, I call it a gratitude journal, right? So I'll give them a notebook. I'll be like, every day, when you're climbing into bed, take 30 seconds and jot down 3 to 5 things that happened good that day, right? It doesn't have to be insane. It can be like, I had a good lunch, right? Lunch was good. I went for a walk before I went to bed, or before tonight, and the sunset was beautiful, right? It doesn't have to be something magical, right? Sometimes people will say, and I don't know if you guys have been told this, but people will be like, oh, go home and journal, right? Sometimes we're big on that in the church, like, oh, journal your feelings, your emotions, right? And I'm not saying that's bad. People don't do it, right? Like, I don't do it. Like, I'll try. Like, I'll get a thing, and I'm going to be like, I'm going to write out all my feelings, and I do like 2 days, and then I don't, right? And so it's just like, it gets to a place where it doesn't become like, it's not serving anything. But this is literally 3 to 5 things, items, right? Good meal, sunset, had a good laugh at the dinner table, talked to some friends today, it was great. Boom, close it, you're done. Right? And all that highlights is that every day there's a couple positive things that happened, and maybe it all didn't suck as much as what we feel it did. So, the last thing, because we just have a couple of minutes left here, the last thing that I would say, I tell this every time that I speak, and I probably will always say this when I speak. You guys, and when we started, you guys raised your hands over a host of different things that were going on. You guys are going through things that a lot of people can't understand, and you've gone through things that a lot of people can't understand. and life is truly painful and life truly hurts, and you're in a spot where maybe you really believe there's nothing good that's going to come out of my life, it would be better off if I was dead than alive. It's a very real feeling, a very real thought. My encouragement would be is do not leave here tonight feeling like you have no one to talk to. I'm here. I'm hanging out here for the next half an hour or whatever till the next thing starts. If you need to talk, come up and grab me. Your leaders, right, are more than willing to talk to you about anything. You might have some reservations. You might be like, I can't talk to them about this. Like, they're going to look at me differently. They might tell my parents. They might do whatever, right? Okay, those are real fears, real concerns, right? But don't leave here tonight feeling like no one loves me. Because I can assure you that you are loved. Like, you are cared about. So don't leave tonight feeling like I'm all alone and that there's no one to talk to me. On the top of the handout is my contact information, right? So there is a phone number there. You can call it. It routes into a mailbox, right? So it's not like it rings on my phone or whatever. It routes into a voicemail box. I get them immediately. It's confidential. You can also text it, right? So if you're in a spot where you're like, there's no way I'm going to call a number and leave a message, but I want to get something off my chest or I need to say something, you can text it. I get that immediately as well. Again, that's fully confidential. I can't tell anybody what you guys tell me. There's some limitations to that, but largely, right? So don't feel like you have to leave tonight and you're like, I got no one. Because you got that phone number and I'm around. We will end. We will wrap up there. It's a heavy topic. Like, I appreciate you guys coming out. Like, it's a heavy thing. It's not a light and fuzzy conversation, right? So I appreciate you guys coming out and wanting to have this conversation. I'm around for a while. If you need to talk, you know where to find me. Otherwise, you can go and get a jump start on your break before the next session starts. Have a good night, guys. Stay out of trouble.